Hello, everybody. Scott Golden here with the Mid Atlantic Championship Wrestling Review Series for the 18th of September, 1982. We continue our foray through these, which are wonderful. If you're not a fan, if you haven't been around this era of wrestling, worth going out of your way to see. We move into the latter half of September here, and we open with a tag team match. Jack Briscoe and Wahoo Mcdaniel, who have shown to be friends in the past, and they continue to be here. Kind of I don't want to say a lame duck edition, but sort of, in that there's a little bit of kind of an underrun there, a little bit. Briscoe and McDaniel, who have been friends for several weeks slash months now in the area, although not really pursuing tag team championships too terribly much. Uh, Jimmy Valiant basically saying he wants to get his hands on anybody who is the benefit of being in Humperdinck's army. Um, Wahoo McDaniel promises to give opportunities to everybody. Leroy Brown and Rick Steamboat want to go at it there. Steamboat kind of gives that promo, and of course Jack Briscoe wants back with Paul Jones, as it were, at some point. But anybody in part of the army of Humperdinck is an enemy. Briscoe comes in and manages to go at it with, as mentioned, adversary here, kind of tying up a little bit, and kind of an enhancement match for these two. Just kind of, I don't want to say odd, but it's a little weird to see Briscoe and Wahoo, Timms and Kernoodle. Kernoodle away from Slaughter for the first time in maybe not forever, but certainly a longer time than most would imagine. Arm drag by Wahoo, which is rare. Wahoo known more as the brawler. Not exactly that he can't do them, but it's just interesting to see Wahoo breaking things down, going to work on the leg, just kind of going back to holds. Jack Briscoe being in there, though, also helps him to keep a little more focused. I have a feeling Kernoodle in there with um, in there with both guys, and it's interesting. Even the shin crusher by Kernoodle manages to get a little bit of an advantage for himself and kind of holding his adversary in place there. Wahoo, of course, going into a bit of a brawl. They cut the ring off, do the heels on Briscoe for a little while in the midpoint of the match, which is a cool thing, I suppose. But Irish whips and Wahoo blocks off any damage to Briscoe, and then we kind of see things continue to go back that way. Wahoo comes in, brutal chops, as it were, and he manages to bring the noise as far as the chops are concerned. Briscoe comes back in and eventually gets the win with a double clothesline for his team, and Briscoe and Wahoo are victorious. We go into kind of more a little bit of a interview with Mike Rotundo. Humperdinck wants to help Rotundo. Rotundo wants nothing to do with this, by the way. We go to Rotundo in a singles match with Ben Alexander. Humperdinck had mentioned moments ago that he was going to watch and guide Rotundo along. Rotundo basically tells him in a very awkward, rigid promo way to get lost. Rotundo managing to hold on to the side headlock, and needless to say, Humperdinck at ringside is a bit of a distraction, although Rotundo does manage to keep the distractions to a minimum for himself going forward. And then we kind of see Ben Alexander keeping things going in his general direction to his advantage for a little while. Back elbow by Alexander, getting the advantage in the way that he wants it. Needless to say, um, you know, Rotundo comes up a little bit with some shots, and then we see Ben Alexander staying on his man to the best of his ability, not exactly wanting to get everything under the sun. Interesting to see a European uppercut. Only interesting because Dory Funk Jr. comes in, and Alexander doing it the week before. Dory makes his TV debut. It's just interesting there. Um, Leg drops and other basic maneuvers, and eventually a win by Rotundo. Humperdinck offers a hand. Rotundo wants nothing to do with it, and there we go. Um, Mike Dalton and um, Juan Ernesto are here. They're kind of talking about being a team a little bit, and ultimately, that doesn't go exactly the way that anybody plans either. We move to the next in series of matches, which happens to be another in the tag team match series here. And that happens to be Ledoux and Brown against Parsons and Davis, which, I mean, Joe Ledoux and Leroy Brown have been a team for um, Sir Oliver Humperdinck for a while now. Um, Odd to see Leroy Brown in a bit of a singlet, trying to cut the ring off there. Ledoux comes off with a hard clothesline right into Parsons, and it turns what was a clothesline into a forearm instead. Ledoux basically unstoppable, hitting a bunch of forearms to the side of the head and going right after his man very aggressively, as it were, and ultimately leading to um, continuations of some damage, and Ledoux and Brown get the victory. Brown using his power. There is a desire to go at it with Jimmy Valiant, continued by Leroy Brown and the Joe Ledoux. Brown basically wants to go at it with Steamboat too, which eventually does happen on television. Juan Ernesto and Jim Dalton seem to have formed at least a temporary team here, and they go at it in tag team match with Steamboat and Youngblood, who start teaming now more regularly than before. I believe Dory Funk Jr. might have taken over the book at this time of the area, because he does come in the following week for the first time in a long time in this general area. Anyway, we go to uh, uh, the continuation of that, and Steamboat dropping knees into the back of his adversary. Youngblood comes in. Youngblood gets a little more fire. Ernesto manages to try to roll up his opponent. Doesn't get all he wants on the roll ups. Shoulder tackles and the like, kind of bouncing along. And Steamboat and Youngblood, a fabulous team, trying to get as much advantages or as many advantages as they can. Elevated splash, and Youngblood takes over a little bit. Common in consistent tags by the tag team here. Keith Larson in a position where he's not exactly happy with the options that he has available to him either, and that kind of goes along the way. And Porkchop Cash is here to team, I guess, with Larson at some point. Cash also out there talking about wanting to get back in his winning ways. Keith Larson very awkwardly cuts promos, but does manage to at least try. Greg Valentine is his adversary for the day. Valentine and Paul Jones against Larson and Porkchop is the next in series of matches here. Not exactly something worth writing home about, not by any stretch of the imagination, but, Jones, of course, still, I believe, your Mid-Atlantic champion. Valentine hasn't really found his way here. There was a decent match, if you haven't been following fully, with Larson and Valentine in the previous weeks, about 2 or 3 weeks ago. Valentine actually hits what it turns out to be almost a modified power bomb on Larson early in the contest. Valentine also cranks down on him and keeps things as simple as he possibly can. Valentine then tags off to Paul Jones. Jones comes in and takes over on Porkchop. Cash for a minute. Cash gets a couple of shots in on Jones, and Valentine cuts him off and goes back in, takes over. Valentine usually does a bit more in terms of longer term selling in the tag matches. Maybe because he's younger, maybe because he's hungry or whatever. But Valentine eventually does get a figure 4 in, and that is good for business. Jones still says he's an unbeatable Mid-Atlantic champion, and we'll be back with more right after this.